Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris or Velo Sews on social media. Susie is known on Instagram as Harping Mad. Now that's harping underscore mad. You'll hear Susie tell us how her family helped her develop her Instagram name. Watch and listen to Susie tell her story for Sober 50 on Sew Organised Style podcast. Hi everyone. Today we've got Susie who is harping mad and she's our first guest. Hi Susie on the
Right.
podcast. And this year we're trialing putting the video and the audio up as well because people want to see our faces.
Yes, that's true. I didn't realize you were going to do that until the other day. So
That's, yeah, that's why I thought I'd better give people a heads up that I'm interviewing this year because we see each other on Instagram all the time, and there is this thing called Reels and this thing called Live. And I trialed Live last year, and I thought I think we can do better based on the videos that we record. It's an environment that people can see and hear, and then they can engage with the listener, like the guests, on
yeah.
Instagram a little bit more closely if they really want to.
Mhm.
Timing of lives is a bit tricky when we've got such a global environment.
Yeah.
Anyway, thought we'd give that a go. So, Susie, thank you for being on the podcast today for Sober 50 on Sew Organised Style.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very honored, especially to be the first video guest.
Yeah, I, a lot of the guests that I've had on the podcast are not people who are there to sell a product or a service. We're everyday people, and being in front of a camera can be a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. But
Yeah.
I think because we know each other through our sewing, I think that's a good way to connect on video.
Yes. And it's really interesting to hear people's voices. When you listen to the previous podcasts that you've done, you can put a voice to a face that you see.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone on Instagram has heard my voice actually, apart from when I sang a Christmas carol or two.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's really interesting.
So the reason we know each other is because of our sewing, and you're a Sober 50 follower.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us about how you started sewing?
Well, it goes back a long, long way. It goes back, oh, more than 60 years because I'm 68. I think when I was about 7, my parents bought me this tiny little sewing machine called a Vulcan,
Oh,
which was a kid's sewing machine. Do you remember them?
I've
And
seen them.
I was so excited and so fascinated. I could not stop using it. It used to sew two pieces of fabric together with a chain stitch underneath
Oh,
the back, quite different to our machines we use now. Um, but it was quite limited. And I think by the time I was 8, I was actually quite bored with it. But I was hooked on the idea of manipulating fabric and creating 3D things out of a flat piece of fabric. My uh, paternal grandmother was a professional musician. She was a church organist, but she was also a dressmaker stroke designer. And she made, back in the, gosh, 20s, early 20s, um, clothes for the people in the village. So my dad always said that I inherited her gene. I'm not a church organist, I'm a harpist, but yeah, when I was 8 and was in primary school, several of my friends came wearing this skirt, which came from a company called Ladybirds. I don't know if you had those in Australia, but we all wore Ladybird clothes in England back then. They came from Woolworths, I think. And I really wanted this skirt, and I pestered and pestered. Um, my mum made all my clothes, so I knew she wasn't going to buy it. Anyway, I came home from school one day, and there on the table was a neatly folded pile of the exact same fabric and a zip. And I looked at it and I said, "Are you going to make me a skirt?" And she said, "No, you're going to make you a skirt."
Oh,
And I was like, wow, I was so excited. But yeah, I made it's like a dirndl skirt gathered into a waistband with a
yep.
zip. So I put a zip in at that age. It did take a few goes, but I wore that skirt to death. And I was so proud that I made it. And I think that's when it all started. I was hooked on the whole idea that you can make your own clothes.
Yeah.
And in my teens, I made my clothes, I made my school uniform. My high school was a boarding school was set in the grounds of the castle of Henry VIII's last wife, Catherine Parr, Queen Catherine. And we wore her cloth. She had her own green cloth that was woven for her specifically. It was kind of like a wool kind of gabardine. Maybe was it called serge? But it was pure wool and it was a sort of mossy green colour.
I was going to
So we
ask
had,
you about the type of green. Yeah.
yeah, it was a sort of moss, darkish moss green, but not bottle green at all. And so yeah, we made our gym slips, and then when we got a bit older, we were allowed to wear skirts, and we wore these 6 gore skirts, and I made those. I made my summer dresses, which were green and white striped cotton, and I just carried on and have sewn ever since, basically. I've had 5 children, as you mentioned earlier, so I've made their clothes too, boys and
Yep.
girls. I had 3 girls and 2 boys, and I've made all of their clothes over the years. And now I sew for my husband, Bill, who's also known as Mr. T on Instagram. I think the nice thing about sewing for your kids and your husband is you get to look at the things you've made,
Mm.
different to wearing the things you've made. You get to see them and see, well, I could improve that a bit here or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Do you ever gravitate back to sewing a six-scored skirt like you did at school?
I did. I did about 20 years ago. I made a couple of moleskin skirts like that.
Yeah.
I haven't since. I'm not that crazy about it at the moment. I'm more into as you've probably seen from my Instagram, kind of hinterland dresses or merchant and mills
Yeah.
gathered, prints or whatever. It hides a multitude of sins, I suppose.
It, I think
Yeah.
it gives you freedom to do all of those walks that you show us on your Instagram account.
Yeah, yeah, it's easier to walk in them. Although I'm just looking out into my garden right now. We're about to go up onto Dartmoor because we've got this challenge to climb as many of the tors, which are the big rocks on Dartmoor, before we move. And it's been raining all night, so it's going to be really boggy up there. So I don't think I'll be wearing a floaty dress today. But yeah, I'm not crazy about this whole idea of if you're a walker, you must wear outdoor clothing from an
Mhm.
outdoor clothing shop. Why should I have to wear polyester trousers? Or yes, maybe they do dry quickly, but I don't go out in pouring rain all day. I just don't buy into that. The wearing of the kind of fabrics like fleece tops that we now know put microfibers into the water and ultimately the sea.
Mm.
So, and people for hundreds of years have walked in wool, haven't they? Wool sweaters and wool jackets and things. And we have oilskin, which
Yeah.
I've made things with. So we wear
Mm.
our oilskin. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, wool has been around for centuries, and flax and cotton, and when it degrades back into the land.
Yes. Yeah. And things like linen takes a lot less in terms of pesticides and water to grow.
Mm.
which is important, isn't it?
Mm.
And wool, I think we should use more of. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but here, um, for example, Dartmoor is covered in sheep. Where I come from in the Lake District in the north of England, it's just sheep everywhere. But a lot of the wool is just thrown away
Mm.
because people stopped using it. And that's so sad.
Mm.
So the more people start knitting, which they are, thankfully now, the more we will be using that wool and help the farmers.
Yeah,
But yeah,
that'd be good.
I mean, the good thing is those not hides, fleeces that are thrown away. Yeah, they do break down back into the earth, but kind of sad that they're wasted.
Mm. I
Yeah,
agree. And you do some wonderful knitting.
yeah, I'm a bit of a knitaholic, I have to say. I think the thing with knitting, I've been through quite a few traumas in my past life, which I won't talk about on here, but
Okay.
pretty when my first three kids were young. And on top of that, I've got MS, and you deal with chronic pain with that. And I also have arthritis. um, but knitting is, I guess it's what we now call mindfulness. It keeps you in the moment.
Hmm.
You know, you're counting constantly, and that counting, you're not counting out loud, but in your mind, I count anyway. Especially doing feral, because you'll do three blue, two grey, three blue,
Yeah.
two grey, let's throw some other thing. That counting slows your mind down, and helps thoughts not to come in your head about pain or about
Hmm.
something negative going on. You know, when I lost each of my parents, I knitted a very complicated jumper in the weeks after. Um, and yeah, I tend to knit more when there's a lot going on. And you've probably seen a lot of knitting this year
Yeah.
because we've been trying to move for 15 months and we're in our fourth chain now. I don't know if you have chains in Australia.
No, we don't.
It's
What is that?
basically in England,
Yeah.
and I think it's just England and Wales, you put your house on the market, somebody comes along who's had an offer on their house and they make an offer on your house and you accept it. But then
Right.
there'll be people behind them who have, you know, who are buying each other's houses. And nothing is guaranteed. And it's never happened to us before, and we've moved. This is my 10th house. I've emigrated twice. Um, we've got to 12 weeks into the process with a whole new bunch of people in a chain. And every time the first person at the beginning of the chain has gone 12 weeks and said, hey, do you know what? I've changed my mind. And they just pull out. And then the
Mm.
whole chain collapses. We're lucky in that we still have our wonderful buyers who say our cottage is their dream. They're moving from London.
Yeah.
So we're just hanging in there for however long because we really like them. Whereas other people might have put the house back on the market, but it seems to be their chain that is the problem. Whether
Mm.
it's because people in London think differently, I don't know. But it's very frustrating. And
Yeah.
we keep, every time we get close to the day where we're going to exchange contracts and move in a week, we sell something or we get rid of a sofa and then it falls apart. So we slowly hardly got any furniture left after 15 months. But I think this time it's going to happen.
Fingers crossed. I
Yeah,
mean, when we
yeah,
came on, yeah, when we came
yeah,
onto this recording, I said, "You've got a really lovely room." And then you described what had been happening with getting rid of furniture and
yeah,
all
yeah.
that.
It's because we've raised five children, a
Yeah.
lot of furniture. Well, I'm 68 as well. A lot of my furniture is quite old. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're moving from a 17th century cottage to a 1980s bungalow. So it's probably be quite different in style inside.
Yeah.
But you can imagine a lot of my furniture is probably quite worn now after all those kids. So yeah, it's quite exciting if we ever get there.
I
Yeah.
mean, you've got all those stories that you and your family have had in this particular house, and now you're going to move to a new one. But I suppose it's the way you want to live your life going forward.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, where we're moving to is still in Devon, but it's right on we're going east along the south coast.
Hmm.
It's on the border with Dorset. It's more rural. It's quite busy here. They've been building a lot over the 20 years we've lived here.
Yep.
It has changed dramatically, and it's not what we signed up for when we moved here, because we moved here from a city
Yeah.
thinking this is country, but it kind of doesn't feel like country to us. Plus, the kids, most of them have gone east, so we want to move a bit closer, but not leave Devon because Devon is just so beautiful. It's lush.
Well, I think it's on our must visit list at one point when we come back to the UK. We missed out last year.
Oh, you definitely should. You'll have
I
to come and
know.
have cream tea in our garden.
And it'll be in the new house, I think, by that stage. Fingers
I hope
crossed.
so. I hope
Yeah.
so. Yeah, we've had quite a few people from Instagram friends who have
Yeah.
made over through the Sew Over 50, who've come here in the last 2 or 3 years and had tea in the garden, and that's been amazing. You know, from Australia and New Zealand, all over. It's so lovely. It's just a
When did you,
brilliant community.
when did you discover the Sub 50 community on Instagram?
It was during the pandemic
Yeah.
because I had to suddenly stop all my teaching, as you can
Mm.
imagine, for months on end. And most of the family came home, one from Berlin, and my husband, they were all working in their office jobs in the cottage, in various parts of the cottage. So I was cooking and cleaning for them. And I thought, I have to do something. And that's when I started looking at Instagram more and discovered that and thought, what a brilliant idea. And it's just gone from there. Sandy and Judith and Ruthie and everybody, they're just so positive, and how they've brought everyone together. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
I love
They've
it.
done a great job. And
Yeah.
that, we're still, when they started in 2018, where are we now? 2025. It's a long time to have a community that's at about 53,000 followers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was that many.
Yeah.
How,
It's a big group. Yeah.
and it's so fantastic how it inspires other people to have a go
Hmm.
who wouldn't have. I mean, I've always done it. I just wasn't doing quite so much dressmaking because before the pandemic, I was performing a lot or um, teaching in primary schools.
Yep.
So I was or teaching wherever. I'm just too busy, basically. Whereas it was just a lifeline for
Mm.
me. And I've actually really cut back on my teaching now. I'd rather sew.
Yeah. It's all
Yes,
swung around.
yeah. And I think one of the really rewarding things is when people say on Instagram, "I've made this dress as inspired by somebody else."
Hmm.
It's so nice and so flattering that, well, people say, "Oh, I like your style," and I think, style? Have I got style? I just wear what I find that interesting. I had to describe my style on the Friday Pattern Company blog a few weeks ago. And one
Yep.
of the questions they sent me was, write about your style. And I had to ask all of my kids, what is my style? I don't know. You just don't think like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, you learn a lot from it.
And how did they describe your style as as their mother? How did they help you?
Um, they said eclectic.
Yeah.
A couple of them just said, "Well, you're just you. It's just you," which wasn't very helpful. Um, boho, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
I spent many years working in IT and having to wear high heels and powered, the suits with the shoulder pads and all that, and go back to the 80s and 90s. And I've really rebelled against that now because I don't need to dress like that. So I've gone completely the other way. Loose linen dresses are my thing. But there are some amazing jean patterns around now, which you can make to fit for yourself. I've always worn jeans from Marks and Spencer's because they were the best fit for me, but actually they weren't. Now I make my own.
Hmm.
It's amazing. I mean, all these young designers are fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm sure So Over 50 has helped them too because of promoting the sewing at home thing. Yeah, we're really, really lucky.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Now, people can find you at Harping Mad
Yes.
on Instagram. So, how did you come up with the name Harping Mad?
Uh, um, when I retired from IT
Yep.
15 years ago, I think, um, and started playing my harp again because I hadn't really touched it. I and my husband, we're both trained recorder players actually before we were harpists,
Yep.
and we started going out playing in folk clubs and things, and we were launching a wedding business, and I said to my kids, "What do we call ourselves?" And I can't remember. One of them said, "Well, you're barking mad." That's right. And I said, "Oh, thanks very much." And then another one said, "Well, harping mad," and that's how it came. I think they meant barking mad as a compliment. I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm completely mad,
No,
but
just take it
yeah,
as a compliment. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's how that came about, and it's quite catchy, I suppose. It's a short name rather than we've been in other bands with maybe slightly pretentious names or long-winded names or whatever. Um, People tend to remember it, I guess.
And so,
Yeah.
moving from being a recordist to a harpist, what made you change or made you include the harp in your repertoire?
Um, my oldest daughter was learning the harp around the time that I met Mr. D,
Okay.
Bill, and I sometimes used to sneak home from the office at lunchtime when I lived in Cardiff and have a go on her harp. I've played the piano since I was 6,
Yeah.
so it's a two-handed instrument, obviously, like the piano, and similar in lots of ways. But my daughter started saying, "You're not playing it; it's mine." And because she played piano too, but she was obsessed with her harp, and she didn't like me playing it because she was on it all the time. So Bill bought me a harp, and I thought he's a keeper.
Yeah.
I mean, how often does that happen? And I was 39, I think, when that happened. Because
Wow.
I met him when I was 36, going on 37.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I guess because I played the piano, it was fairly easy to switch over. Apart from the hand technique is different,
Yep.
and we lived in Cardiff, and of course Wales is known for harp, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
its main instrument, really. So plenty of teachers there, and yeah, I've just carried on playing it. Now I teach it.
That's
It's a
great.
fabulous instrument.
Yeah.
It's very calming to play. I think the other reason why like it or liked it when I started playing is I knit Fair Isle. This
Mm-hmm.
is going to sound really obscure, but Fair Isle is like two colours or whatever in or three colours interweaving
Right.
around,
Yep.
three red, two grey, two black, three red, two grey. And Celtic tunes like Scottish and Irish tunes um, kind of use the strings in the same way. You use like alternate strings. It's like it weaves in and out
Yep.
like the knitting. And I think there probably is a correlation
Mm.
um, with that. I don't know, but that's my strange connection with it, I suppose. But it helps if you think like that. It helps you to memorize tunes and play them too, rather than dots on the sheet of music. If you
Okay.
think of it as weaving in and out of the strings. So I tend to teach a bit that way.
Okay.
Most of my students are, bar one, are well over 60 now. I don't teach children anymore. And one of them is in her 80s. She's amazing. She's also deaf, or partly deaf. So she sits opposite me and, um, lip reads. But and it's wonderful to see it. My neurologist is really, really pleased that I play harp,
Mm-hmm.
because harp and piano, because you use two hands doing two different
Yep.
things at the time, means you're firing neurons on both sides of your brain all the time.
Right.
Um, and when I first met my new neurologist, she said, um, I have quite a lot of scarring on my brain, or demyelination, they call it. And with that amount, I should be presenting in a wheelchair. I was 56 at the time.
Yep.
And she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Play." Well, I teach harp and perform and stuff. And she said, she thought for ages, and then she said, "Oh my goodness, do not stop." And then she explained about the neurons, because that means your brain is constantly kind of rewiring itself, or I
Yeah.
don't know what the actual medical term is, but so I said that I was going to start teaching adults more than children, and she said, "Do, because it is so good as an older person to do something like that,
Mm.
um, because it's so good for your brain. Hopefully it will ward off dementia, but
Well,
who knows?"
you, you're 68 and you've been, you had this feedback from the neurologist about doing it in your 50s. So something's got to be
Yeah,
working.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And they actually think I've probably had MS most of my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
I've always played music, and I've always had lots of interests like sewing and knitting, and so I think the key to health is keeping active and keeping your mind busy, isn't it?
And do you still have a support for your MS through medication, or have you stopped that?
I've stopped it. I stopped it because the prescription pain meds I
Yeah.
had for 11 years, and I had to keep increasing them
Mm.
to the point where I was topping up with over the counter ones in
Mm.
order to function.
Mm.
I'm going back about 18 months now. And my MS nurse just kept saying, "You're maxed out, you can't have any more."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, maybe I should come off." "Oh, no, you can never come off." And and then I just decided to go and see a naturopath who who was a GP, and he helped me come off the pain meds.
Yep.
And now I don't need them. I'm not in I am in pain by the end of the day if I've been doing too much of one thing, like if
Yep.
I sew for hours. But I would
Mm.
imagine at my age, probably that's quite normal. Um, But no, I don't need those meds. But coming off them was pretty horrendous.
Mm,
It was just awful. It's like coming off heroin, they say,
mm,
because they mess with your neural pathways to make you think you're not in pain. So all that has to be undone, I suppose. So it wasn't very easy. It is one of the reasons why I've made so many clothes this year, to try and take my mind off the fact that I itched all over, or whatever. But it's fantastic to know that I now just have supplements, quite a few every
mm.
day, but that I can control the symptoms that way. And I'm able to be much more active. And being active helps too with arthritis and MS.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I think, I saw my physiotherapist a year ago because I was on
Mm.
crutches. My knees were so swollen. And I said, I can't get off the floor. I'd fallen over. I kept falling over when I was coming off the drugs. And I said, I can't get up off the ground. And he said, well, don't get on the ground. And
Okay.
he said, you'll never be able to get off the floor again. So, and he basically wrote me off. And I said, I'm 67.
Mm.
Um, I just ignored him. He told me to stop hiking to the beach, which is a steep track down to cold water swim. And I did for a while, and I didn't get any better. So I went through the pain barrier and struggled down with crutches. And that was the start of getting better. So the swimming every day. And I'm not swimming at the moment. It's too cold when you get
Oh,
up
I
to
know.
change.
Yeah.
The water's cold, but it's not the water that's the problem. It's the wind, because it's a beach that doesn't have a changing area or whatever.
Mm.
We can walk to it behind me here. There's a big hill, and we walk over the hill and down the steep track
Mm.
to a beautiful private beach. But there's no changing facilities there. So my next door neighbour swims every day still. She's amazing, and she's my age.
And has it been snowing there as well?
Not here because we're on the south coast, but
Okay.
only probably about 20 miles north. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's still cold.
Yep. It's
But
colder than it would ever be here in Sydney.
yeah,
Yeah.
how cold are your winters?
We rarely get single digits. Like, what, 5 degrees is cold, but that's as we don't get
That's
snow.
no,
And it lasts probably for like a few weeks, if that.
right.
Yeah.
Wow, it's 5 degrees here, and I'd say that's probably an average cold
Hmm.
day here. We did have frost the other morning, which is unusual, but because we're by the sea and we're on the very south of England, we're very lucky. It's the
Yeah.
warmest bit. It's
Okay.
one of the wettest bits as well, though.
Okay. So it must be very green.
It's incredibly green.
Yeah.
When we go abroad to for holiday, like Spain or somewhere like that that's fairly arid, Lanzarote or somewhere, and you fly back into England and you come in over the sea,
Mm.
you're just struck by how vibrantly green it is here.
Yeah.
And I just love it. I really missed it when I lived in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when just so that our viewers and listeners can understand, when we first started chatting, when Susie and I first started chatting, we wanted to cover a few topics, which we have. And I think the only topic that we didn't cover, but I think it lends itself to, you've been doing a lot of walks, you've changed your medication, and say you've lost weight, and that's, I suppose, one of the things that has helped you be more active as a sewist.
Absolutely, yes, yes, yeah. I mean, the weight I put on was purely because of the meds,
Mm,
because I've been off them for over a year now, and I've maintained the same weight, and I've never dieted. It purely was the medication.
yeah.
Um, but the great thing was that my clothes didn't fit, so great excuse to make a new wardrobe. So, and in a way, not being able to move as easily as we thought we could has given me the time to do that.
Mm,
So I've
mhm.
had a blast. When we move, it'll be more about making things for the home.
Okay.
My my parents converted a bobbin mill, a working wooden bobbin mill that made bobbins for the textile industry in the north of England, on a mountain in the Lake District, the kind with the water wheel. And
Yeah.
it was my dad converted the top two floors into a house. I guess it was a forerunner to all these loft living
Mm,
places that they now that are really trendy. And they made it completely themselves. They even made the carpets. They Well, they didn't make the carpets themselves, but they bought rolls of different beautiful shades of terracotta and slate blue and moss green and mustard, and then my father made a template of wood that was 18 inches square, and then a 9-inch square, a
mm.
9 by 18 oblong, and an L shape. And then they cut with a Stanley knife all these colours into different shapes, and then glued them to thick wool felt, because this mill was quite drafty, as you can imagine. Um, and they carpeted the entire house with patchwork carpets. And that was so inspiring. I'm not going to do that in our bungalow because I actually
No.
prefer wood floors, but
Yeah.
it was inspiring. And my father made the furniture, he made the sofa and chairs. My mum covered them in green linen. Um, they just made everything. He even made he made the kitchen, he made the fridge, he made a wooden fridge.
Wow.
And I'm not sure about that actually because we had a lot of tummy bugs when we were kids. But I grew up in that kind of environment where
Mhm.
you make stuff. So when we move, I'm going to be more involved in. I want to do some crewel work, linen curtains,
Yep.
and hand make them. I'm a bit nervous about saying that on here because I might have to do it now. But there's lots of things like that that we want to do, and
Yep.
we've just signed up for some courses to, like, I make lampshades. I'm going to make more linen lampshades and things like that. I'd like it to be a handmade home
Mm.
to counteract the fact that it's quite modern and that's not really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we're moving to the bungalow is because I was on crutches much of the past year
Yep.
and it seemed to make sense. Now I'm fine. I'm like, I don't need to move, um, but it does make sense. It's kind of
Mm.
future proofing, but I want it to feel as bohemian as this house is. I don't know if you've seen it on my Instagram. If
I
you go on
think,
my profile, you can look at the listing on the real estate agent Rightmove. It's really bohemian. It's quite wacky.
I'll have
Um,
that in the links for the show notes and for the video so people can have
yeah,
a look.
yeah, it's interesting. It was done. Like, there was a gardener who used to live here, who I think worked for the National Trust, and he was very he was a Rastafarian, and
Hmm.
he knocked the cottage about and did some really interesting things to it. And the garden is stunning.
Mm.
I really miss it,
Okay.
but we're going to make the new house cool. So there'll be less clothes making and more homeware making, is what
I
I'm
think
trying to say.
that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on going forward. And I wish you all the best with moving
Thank you.
in
Thank you.
2025.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for coming on to the podcast, Susie.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. It's lovely to chat to you in person as well.
Yeah. Hopefully, listeners and viewers enjoyed this video and audio podcast, and hopefully, we'll keep going with them.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
hope so.
Okay.
Thank you so. Happy New Year
Happy
and
New
Happy
Year.
New Year to everyone else.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. This episode of Sew Organised Style podcast for Sober 50 was video and audio produced by me in my sewing room with permission of Susie. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.